Okay, let's begin with the word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are very thankful once again to be coming together to study your word, to look into the book of Ezekiel and into the prophecies of the Bible. We know, Lord, that we're frail human beings, and there's many things that we do not see or notice that are hidden in your word. And we just ask that your Holy Spirit can be here to enlighten our minds, to strengthen our intellect, to help our memories, and to work upon our characters as we study your word. We know, Lord, that we want to represent you in all that we do. And we know that the standard is very high, and it's something that without your aid, we will be unable to attain. So we ask, Lord, that you can live in our hearts and our minds and be here in this study. And we thank you for all these things. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So we're going to be looking first at Numbers chapter 2. And I'm not sure how far we're going to get in looking at Ezekiel chapter 1 and 47, or 48. So there's a lot of things we need to tie together. So why are we looking at Numbers chapter 2? I'll bring up the scripture passages here.
This is to do with how the tribes surrounded the tabernacle.
Right. So we're going to look at how they surrounded the tabernacle. And the reason that we're doing that has to do with the layout of the division of the land, and also the gates of the the city, and also looking at the names of the tribes in Revelation and different places. So it's not something that is that straightforward. That is, when you look at what different commentators say, there's actually a wide variety of opinions about a lot of these things. So they're things that there's general agreement upon. And you're going to see when we look at Numbers chapter 2 that the layout of the camp is not as straightforward as you would think. And I've seen at least 3 different ways in which people interpret this arrangement of the camp. So we're going to look at that. And there are probably actually 4 that I've seen. Now, so we're going to look at this arrangement of the camp, but before we do that, we're going to go to Genesis chapter 48. Or is it 47? No, 48, 46. Where is it here? Is it 49? Yeah, there it is, 49. So Jacob is going to bless his son. So in 48, that's the blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh, which are the 2 sons of Joseph. And here we're going to go through the blessings that were given to the different sons of Jacob. So let's read this passage here. It says, "And Jacob called unto his sons and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days." So one of the things that's interesting here, I mean, it's pretty obvious on the surface. What does he mean by the last days? Why is he talking about the last days when he's blessing his sons?
Doesn't he just mean what's in the future?
Okay.
But he's being prophetic. He's wanting the people that live within the last days to understand what is going to be happening, plus to see the characters that will need to be developed or avoided.
Yeah. So if you look at, I'm just using a modern translation, an easy English translation. He says, "My sons, come here to me, and I'll tell you what will happen in the future." And that's kind of correct. But we know that this idea of last days isn't just the future, that it's referring to the last end, the future, of course, it does apply to, but it's also translated as remnant or residue. So we know that Jacob is making a prophecy, not just about what's going to happen to his sons, but to his sons, 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 all the way down. So we know this isn't just talking about these sons themselves. And we've all already applied it that way. When we talk about Judah, Judah is the kingship, and it's going to carry all the way down to Christ and his kingship, etc. So these are prophecies, these blessings. He's not necessarily saying something that's good, because he calls them a blessing. But a lot of them I wouldn't necessarily call blessings, but this was a way of prophesying over his sons, their destiny and the destiny of their descendants. And in verse 2, it says, "Gather yourselves together and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel your father. So Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power." So he's saying some good things about Reuben, and then he's going to say some bad things. "Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, thou defiledest thou it. He went up to my couch." So we know what he's referring to here. Now, as far as showing the future of Reuben, what is this showing about Reuben as far as the future?
That he doesn't make very good decisions.
Right. So he doesn't make good decisions. Also, it says, "Thou shalt not excel." Now we know, of course, that he doesn't receive the birthright, even though he is the firstborn.
He doesn't receive any portion of the birthright.
Right. Any of it. Yeah. Any portion. So he doesn't receive, well, other than, as a tribe, he receives his share of land, places to live, but he doesn't get the double portion. He doesn't get the kingship, and he doesn't get the priesthood. So those things he has forfeited them by his behavior. Simeon and Levi are brethren, instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly, mine honor, be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they dig down a wall. So he doesn't really even say anything good about them. He says, "Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and for their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel." Now, this is referring both to Simeon and Levi. So why does he put theirs together, their blessing?
They were the instigators of the revenge for the defilement of Dinah.
Right, their sister.
Yep.
And now when it says, "I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel," we know this is true of Levi. And how did it happen with Levi that he's scattered in Israel?
Well, he became the priest, and as the priest, he was not granted a specific portion of land.
Right. Now, and this is kind of interesting here, because it doesn't say anything about Levi becoming the priests here in this blessing. It just says they're going to be scattered. But Levi, because of their actions, the tribe of Levi's actions in the rebellion that occurred, um, and other actions that they took, they were then blessed, being given the priesthood. But the prophecy of them being scattered was then fulfilled for them literally in that sense. Now, what about Simeon? How would Simeon be scattered? Any ideas on that?
Well, in the literal situation, Simeon was the one that had really pressed for the sale of Joseph to the Ishmaelites.
Yeah.
So he scattered his brother, but Simeon's tribe was also one of those that lived in the northern portion.
Yeah.
So they would have been scattered.
Right. Yeah, so they would have, now he says, I'll scatter them in Israel, referring, and I would think that primarily refers to Levi.
Right.
And I will divide them in Jacob. So there's these two words. I'll divide them in Jacob. So he uses the name Jacob here, and scatter them in Israel. So why do you think there's this parallelism? What's the difference between dividing them in Jacob and scattering them in Israel?
Interesting question. I don't have a thought on that.
Okay. Now, here, I'm going to unstop the share here and then reshare. So I'm going to do some searching here. Anybody else on this point?
Well, Ellen White, I was just looking at what she was saying, and she says that they were the smallest tribe.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And only had a small portion of Judah's lot. And,
Yeah, and I was trying to find that here exactly how they were divided, where they were. I'm just looking at a map here. Well, this map's pretty difficult because it's in Latin.
yeah, she says families afterwards became powerful. They formed different colonies and settled in territory outside the borders of the Holy Land.
Yeah, that's kind of what I understood, but I'm trying to find this. So my understanding is that Simeon was not necessarily scattered in the same way that Levi was scattered among, but they're more divided. So I take the divided as reference to Simeon and the scattering as the reference to Levi. Yeah, Simeon was held as a hostage in Egypt as a pledge, Genesis 42:24.
Interesting little passage from spiritual gifts too.
Okay, what's that?
He then prophesied in regard to Simeon and Levi, who practiced deception to the Shechemites, and then in a most cruel, revengeful manner destroyed them.
Yeah.
They were also the ones who were the most guilty in the case of Joseph. So Ellen White is giving Simeon and Levi to this issue with Joseph. So I was incorrect. I thought it was strictly Simeon.
Okay.
Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are their habitations. O my soul, come thou not into their secret. Unto their assembly mine honor. Be thou not united, for in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they digged down a wall. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And I'm looking to see if there's anything else that she says about this.
Okay. Now, just dealing with each of these. So Simeon and Levi are both sons of Leah, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to see here. So we had Reuben, first Reuben, then Simeon, then Levi. Now, so Simeon and Levi, it seems to me, when it says they are brethren, I mean, it seemed that they tended to work together.
Wouldn't be uncommon.
Yeah. So they kind of gang together. So when it came to Joseph, they would also have a much greater hatred toward Joseph, probably than some of the other brethren, because of their age being older, and also the rivalry between the mothers. Where I would think some of the sons born to the handmaids wouldn't have the same animosity. But that's just kind of a guess with that. But that would just seem logical. Now, Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. Thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies, and thy father's children shall bow down before thee. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down, he couched as a lion, and as an old lion. Who shall rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. So this has a lot of things in it. So he's obviously going to have the kingship. That's the scepter shall not depart from Judah. He's the one who's ruling, making the laws. And it says, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. So that's a reference to the point that the temple is going to be in the tribe of Judah, ultimately. But at this point, when Jacob is blessing his sons, I mean, they would have no idea of what's going to happen in the future, right? As far as just, them thinking about it. They're not planning what's going to happen. They don't foresee the history in that sense from a human point of view. But God is speaking to Jacob in this language, which some of it is quite direct. And it wouldn't be that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because we see, for instance, their first king is not from the tribe of Judah. Right? Their first king is from the tribe of Benjamin. But it's David who ends up becoming king and setting up the Davidic dynasty. So, and even the whole struggles of how that occurs is something that obviously all these things could not have been foreseen from a human perspective. So Jacob isn't just speaking from his own wishes or desires. He's speaking prophetically. Now, it says Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea. He shall be an haven for ships, and his border shall be unto Zidon. Now, and just going back, actually, I kind of left out some stuff with Judah. Binding his foal unto the vine, and his ass's colt unto the choice vine, he washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes shall be red with wine, his teeth white with milk. What is this a reference to with Judah? Judah has a very long blessing. And Dwight put a list to see third spiritual gifts, 156 and 157, I think.
I think the reference certainly to the garments and wine and clothes in the blood of grapes is referring to the judgment at the end of the world, the second coming, that Christ, he has a sickle in his hand.
Yeah.
And the angel says reap. And then it talks about the blood of the grape,
Yeah.
going to the 2,000 or 1,600 furlongs, to the bridles, horses, to the horse bridles, and so it's referring, I think, to the second coming.
Yeah, so this brings us to Christ. Now, what about binding his foal unto the vine and his ass's colt unto the choice vine? What specifically is this reference?
Well, it has connotations with the triumphal entry.
Yeah. So we see that, this obviously, there's tons of references here to Christ that we can see, both to, and specifically referring to his kingship, right? Because he rode in on the triumphal entry upon an ass, right? And the colt, the foal of an ass, right? So, and then of course he washed his garments in wine. Now, so we think about the blood part of that, the judgment. What else would this washing garments in wine refer to? Because we think about the judgment that he does at the end of the world. But would this at all apply to his redemptive nature?
Well, to the cross?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I've always seen that it sort of has a dual. The reason that Christ can come and judge the world is because he came and saved the world. He took upon himself our fallen nature and then died for us, right? So, to me, those elements are tied together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it says the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh come, what is Shiloh? What is this a reference to?
Well, I think Shiloh is another name. This is like Christ, but also obviously it's referencing Shiloh where the tabernacle was set up initially.
Yeah. Yeah, and Shiloh comes from, it's related to the name Solomon. Solomon is Shlomo, this is Silo. It means peaceable, quiet, prosperous. And so this is a reference to the Messiah. So when it says the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh come, is that the case of what actually happened? Because what happened to the kingship before it was passed to Christ?
Yeah, they ended at Zedekiah.
Yeah, it ended at Zedekiah. Yeah. And he says, I shall overturn it. So it went from Zedekiah to Medo Persia. Well, I guess to technically Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, and then Rome. And then in the time of Rome, that's when Christ then comes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both in his first coming and his second coming are both in the time of Rome, because we're still in the time of Rome, technically. So there's lots of references here. Now, of course, with some of these others, there's not so much detail. Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and he shall be an haven for ships. His border shall be unto Zidon. Issachar is a strong ass couching down between two burdens. He saw that rest was good, and the land it was pleasant, and he bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant unto tribute. So he's somebody who labors, but he labors more as a servant. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path, that biteth the horse's heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. I've waited for thy salvation, O Lord. So Dan, we know, he's a backbiter. And initially, his standard is, as we're going to see, is a serpent, but was later changed to an eagle, according to rabbinic tradition. An eagle with a serpent in its mouth or in its beak. And then we have Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at last. So Gad is an overcomer. Out of Asher, his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. So Asher is prosperous. Naphtali is a hind let loose, he giveth goodly words. So some of these have some very positive aspects to them. Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. The archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him. So what is this a reference to? The archers. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Even by God thy Father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessing of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of thy father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors, unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren. So what is this all reference to in regard to Joseph?
The fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Well, certainly the branches that run over the wall reminds me of the parable or the story that Jesus tells just before he goes to Gethsemane. He sees this here vine that Elmite says that he planted it, and they tried to uproot it, and then God planted it over the other side of the wall.
Okay.
And then it sprang up. So that there just seems to connect, but although I don't think there was like a well near it.
Okay. Yeah, well, I don't know. But we can see here Joseph being fruitful. He's receiving the double portion. Right. So that's one of the things about the fruitfulness of it. And that other peoples are blessed by it. Now, what about the archers? Have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him. So, I mean, there would be just the obvious thing dealing with the fact that he was criticized by his brethren. But his bow abode in strength. So even though all this opposition that happened to him, he was still blessed nonetheless.
Yes.
Okay. But also archers are a reference to what?
Ishmael.
To Islam, right? And we know he was sold to the Ishmaelite traders.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So there would be a reference to that as well. So he's going to be blessed, that we know, based upon the fact that he gets the double portion. And the blessings of thy father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors, unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph. So what does it mean that these blessings of thy father, which would be Jacob, are upon the head of Joseph and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren? How would this be fulfilled?
Would this be relating that his two sons then became two different tribes?
Yeah. Yeah. So two different tribes. And so they get the double portion. And this would be when we think about the blessings of thy father. So how was Jacob blessed?
He received the birthright from Isaac.
Right. He received the birthright, but also he, when he worked for, what's the guy's name?
Laban.
Laban. Yes. So for Laban, for 7 years, and then an extra 5 years.
6.
6 years.
6 years. Yeah. So he worked for 20 years for Laban, and he was blessed, right? So the type of blessing that he had, this temporal blessing, he's going to give, this blessing is going to be upon the head of Joseph, right? And that's what it's saying to me. So all these different things, because basically Jacob started with nothing, right? He had to flee from the wrath of his brother. And so he started out with nothing, and yet God blessed him. And Joseph really went through a very similar experience. I mean, he's sold into slavery, and yet he receives this blessing because of his character. So, and then Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. So what would this be a reference to with Benjamin? How would this have been fulfilled?
Through Saul?
Through Saul, right? Does he raven as a wolf?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And does he devour the prey and in the daytime, in the morning, but divide the spoil at the nighttime?
That's a good description.
Yeah. So he's, Saul ends up being this warlike person, but it's all about what he can get for himself.
Okay. Take a look at the chat for just a second.
Okay. Look at Judges 5:14-18. That one?
Right.
Okay. So out of Ephraim there was a root of them against Amalek. After thee, Benjamin among thy people, out of Machir came down governors, and out of Zebulun they that handle the pen of a writer. And the princes of Issachar were with Deborah, even Issachar and also Barak, and he was sent on foot into the valley. For the division of Reuben there was great thoughts of heart. So this is talking about period of the judges with Deborah. So what are we supposed to look at here? I guess we go further, eh? Why abodest thou among the sheepfolds to hear the bleatings of the flocks? For the divisions of Reuben there were great searchings of heart. Gilead abode beyond Jordan. And why did Dan remain in ships? Asher continued on the seashore and abode in his breaches. Zebulun and Naphtali were people that jeoparded their lives unto the death in the high places of the field. So this is just talking about some of the sons in the northern kingdoms that were involved in this battle against Amalek. Any point on this, that why we're looking at it? Because maybe there's something I don't notice.
It seems to give a breakdown, especially at the time of the judges, of some of the things that they were seeing about the characters of these tribes.
Okay. Yeah. And it's interesting. So this is Ephraim, which is usually descriptive of northern Israel. It's often called Ephraim. So it says, out of Ephraim, there was a root of them against Amalek. And I'm not sure here. I'd want to look up root. Okay. Yeah. So many of them came against Amalek. And this would be Benjamin, Zebulun, Issachar, and Reuben, and Dan, Zebulun, and Naphtali. I mean, obviously, these are the northern kingdoms. So this is in the north. Judah's not mentioned.
Okay, but Benjamin was not in the north. Benjamin was in the south.
Yeah, Benjamin's in the south, which is interesting.
So
you don't have Judah mentioned. So it's not the king. So, and Benjamin, of course, is in the south, but I think Benjamin's in the sort of the north of Judah, the kingdom of Judah. Isn't it sort of to the west? Or
I always thought that Benjamin was more surrounded by Judah.
Yes, but it's to the west, to the northwest. Yeah, they actually are. Judah goes around them because Judah goes up to the coast where Benjamin doesn't. I'm just trying
But it's interesting that it says, out of Ephraim, there was a root of them against Amalek, because the responsibility to give the judgment against Amalek was given to Saul, who was of Benjamin, but he didn't fulfill it.
Yeah, and so Benjamin ends up coming against Amalek. And I wonder if that has to do with that past.
Well, I'm just, all I'm looking at, given that this is the time before Saul.
Oh, right. It's the time before Saul. You're correct.
It's recognizing that out of Ephraim, there was a root against Amalek. And after Ephraim, then came Benjamin.
Okay. Okay, so when it talks about Ephraim, it's just talking about the tribe of Ephraim, not necessarily the whole northern kingdom.
Right.
Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah, and so it's and so it's prefiguring to some degree with Benjamin being involved. So Benjamin, and just looking back at the reference, because we were looking at Benjamin because of what it said about Benjamin. He shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. So it seems that Benjamin seems to be more warlike than Judah, at least in this context that we're looking at here.
Now, wasn't Benjamin known for their archers?
I think so, if I remember correctly. But
weren't they also known because Benjamin had more left-handed archers than any of the other tribes?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's Benjamin that I know it's one of the tribes, but that sounds right.
Because left-handed archers would have been very much an anomaly.
Which is odd because Benjamin means son of the right hand.
Exactly.
So, okay, so we spent some time going over this because I really just wanted to get fresh in our mind the different tribes and that they have different characteristics. So where I want to go to now is to Numbers. So there's lots that we could study about the different tribes. So in Numbers chapter 2, it says, verse 2, every man of the children of Israel shall pitch by his own standard with the ensign of their father's house. Far off about the tabernacle of the congregation shall they pitch. Now, we're going to look at this and we're going to try to make a decision of how they're laid out. And as I said earlier, there's about 4 different ways in which people interpret these passages. And on the east side, toward the rising of the sun, shall they of the standard of the camp of Judah pitch throughout their armies. And Nahshon the son of Amminadab shall be the captain of the children of Judah. And his host, and those that were numbered of them, were 14,600. So we're going to write these numbers down. I'll do this all on the board. And those that do pitch next unto him shall be of the tribe of Issachar. And Nathaniel the son of Zuar shall be the captain of the children of Issachar. And his host and those that were numbered thereof were 54,400. And then the tribe of Zebulun, and Eliab the son of Helon shall be the captain of the children of Zebulun. And his host and those that were numbered thereof were 57,400. So here we have this. So I'm going to draw this. So I'll switch this. Okay. So I have a rough drawing there of the sanctuary and the area around it. So obviously nothing's going to be in proportion. So who are we going to have on the east? So we're going to have Judah,
Issachar,
and Zebulun. Now, how are they laid out? Does it tell us? Now, so there's one way that people do it, because you're going to see that they're going to then go to the south and then to the west and then to the north. So what a lot of people do is they lay it out like this. They put Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. So you have Judah over here, Issachar, and Zebulun around the sanctuary. And then you continue around this way. Now, some people will put Judah in the middle and Issachar and Zebulun on either side. And then another option, so there's 4 different ways. You could also do it this way. Judah over here, Issachar, and then Zebulun. Would that make sense based on what we just read?
It can be.
Yeah. Another way is to switch this, to put Judah, Issachar, Zebulun. So I've seen all 4 ways being illustrated. Now we're going to see that when the armies go out, that Judah's going to go out first, or when, not necessarily to battle, but just anytime they move, Judah's going to lead, followed by Issachar and Zebulun, and then they're going to go the ones here on the south, and then they're going to be followed by the ones on the north, and then finally on the west, with Benjamin being last. So in that context, this is my decision. I decided that Judah's going to be in the front here, Issachar and Zebulun toward the sanctuary. Any ideas on this? I know not everybody's really thought about this yet. So what would be the reason I would do it this way?
It'd be giving more, say, the larger of the tribes and the stronger of the tribes to go first, and then the weaker tribes to follow.
Right. Yeah. So that would be one way to look at it. Now, if you put Judah here, Issachar, and Zebulun, that would be pretty difficult for Judah to go first.
Well, we're also talking that here are the tribes that are going to surround the temple.
Right.
They're going to surround the tabernacle itself. Now, like what you're doing, I'd spent a bit of time just going through this to get an idea in this layout, because what comes after on the interior near the tabernacle on that particular side would be Moses and the priests.
Yeah, you're going to have Moses and the priests here, and then the Levites in the Merari, Kohath, and
Gershom.
Gershom on the other sides. I can't remember where they go right now. Now, one of the things we looked at was these words dealing with north and south and east and west. And the word that's being used for the east, there's actually two different words that are going to be used referencing the east in the Bible. The one refers to going forward. It means to go forward. And that's the word east. And that's why when I put Judah here, because they're going to go forward first, that they would be to the furthest to the east. Now, it is possible that Judah's in the middle, and then you have Issachar and Zebulun. But the way the Bible describes it, it says you have Judah, and next to them Issachar. And that would imply that they're going in a line. So if you were going to have Judah on the east, Judah would be here, then Issachar, then Zebulun, if you were going to put them this way. But this would make more sense based upon that Judah's going to go first, Issachar next, Zebulun, and then they would be following the tribes this way, following out, and then this way following out, and the Levites and the priests would be in the middle, and then these would be at, actually I think it goes this way, priests and Levites, then the north, then the west.
Well,
if I remember correctly.
From the census that was done of all of those tribes.
Yeah.
Judah was the most populous.
Yeah.
74,600.
Mm-hmm.
Issachar was next at 54,400. Excuse me, Zebulun would have been next, but Zebulun is mentioned last. Zebulun had 57,400. So there's a 3,000 person difference between Zebulun and Issachar.
Yeah.
Now, that's the camp, and the total of that camp of Judah was 186,400.
Yeah. Okay.
Now,
yep. Keep going.
as you're going through that, especially with what's to the south, you then had Reuben, Simeon, and Gad.
Yeah.
With the most populous of those tribes being mentioned second. That's Simeon.
Okay. Well, let's write these numbers down here. So, Judah's how many?
74,600.
And this one was what? 47,000.
Issachar is 54,400.
Okay. And
Zebulun 57,400.
no, these are both 400?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, when you take the total of them, that comes to 186,400.
Yeah. Okay, that's right. Okay, and then over here we're going to have
Right to left, you have Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. Or God, it actually is the way we would pronounce that.
yeah. And the
Reuben,
numbers?
46,500. Simeon, 59,300. God, 45,650.
It ends up being 100 and
151,450.
yeah. I actually wrote this all out before, but I erased it. And then we have
Okay, then we going from north to south, we would have Benjamin, Manasseh, and Ephraim.
okay, yeah, from Well, depends which way we do it. If we
Okay.
put Benjamin at the end,
Okay.
yeah,
Benjamin, 35,400. Manasseh, 32,200. Ephraim, 40,500.
and then on the north,
We have reading from left to right, or however you wish to do this, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali.
okay,
Dan,
And-
62,700. Asher, 41,500. Naphtali, 53,400. Total, 157,600.
okay,
And for the camp of Ephraim to your left, the
Yeah.
total was 108,100.
okay. Now, so in trying to decide how these are laid out, we actually have some different options. I mean, you could have had Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Now, the standards, we know the standard for Judah is the lion, right?
Right.
And so they're going to be led by the lion of the tribe of Judah as they go, as they move. Now,
Okay.
Reuben is a man, right? Ephraim is the ox,
Okay.
and Dan is going to be the eagle or the serpent. Okay. Now, when you would lead out, you're always going to lead out with your standard.
Right.
Now, so we could say that maybe that the order that we have these in, like this to me makes sense here for this side. But would we have to have it, because what you'll see people do is they'll have either, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and then like I did here, Reuben, Simeon, and Gad, or the other way around. But could it be that you would have it lined up in a sense? So you got the temple in the beginning, and you're going to have these tribes out in the front, and then these ones more like this on the side going in this order, so that they're all kind of lined up in the same line. Does that make sense? So
It's
instead of,
understandable.
yeah, because this would just be in the order that they go out. And so when it comes to the standards, the way that I often looked at it is that the standards were around the tabernacle itself. So you would have had the lion over here. So you'd have Judah right next to this here. And that's the way that most people have drawn them. You'd put Ephraim in the middle here. You would put Reuben in the middle here. And you would put Dan in the middle here. And then you would have on either side of them Asher and Naphtali, on either side Issachar and Zebulun, on either side Simeon and Gad, either side Benjamin and Manasseh. But maybe that's what happens on this part, or maybe even on all the other parts. Maybe there's a mixture of how it's divided, because it needs to be divided in a practical way for the tribes to go out east. And so if you're going to have Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun then go out, now you could have Judah going out from the middle, and then Zebulun coming from the side, and then or Issachar coming from the side, and then Zebulun, and then then you would have, of course, you would want to have Reuben here, and then Simeon, and then Gad. Or actually, it gives us in this order Gad, Simeon, and Reuben, right? So you would have this. So the question is, because there's so many different combinations in ways that you could arrange this, but most people try to make it somewhat symmetrical in that however they do this, they sort of pattern each of the other ones after that. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Right? Because I said there's 4 basic ways. So
Right.
center, and the basic ways is you would lay the first tribe, either the second and the third, the fourth tribe, the fifth and the sixth, like that. Or you could do the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. Right? Then the priests and the Levites, then the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, and then the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th.
Well, okay, but that's not the way that worked out.
What do you mean?
Okay, if you're looking at the layout,
Yeah.
If I start from the east, you wind up with 3 tribes that are all of Leah, and they are the 4th, the 9th, and the 10th of the sons.
Yeah. Okay.
On the west, you have tribes that are all of Rachel,
Yeah.
but they're technically the 12th, 13th, and 14th, since Joseph is not mentioned, and we're taking the 2 grandsons.
Yeah, I understand. So these are Joseph, these are all Joseph and Benjamin.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so what you have on the north in this example from Numbers is you have the 5th and 6th sons, which are Dan and Naphtali, which are the ones that are born of Bilhah, which was Rachel's handmaiden. And you
Okay,
have
yeah. So I understand what you're saying. You're saying, talking about the order of the sons.
correct.
I'm talking about the order in which they march out, which isn't in the order that they're born.
Okay, I get what you're saying. I was looking at the numbers as being intriguing as to the order of their birth and their placement in these locations.
Yeah, and so it's not the same. So in this case, I'm just saying that when you're going to have Judah go out first, then Issachar, then Zebulun,
Right.
then you're going to have Reuben, Simeon, and Gad following that, or the other way around, right? Gad, Reuben, and Simeon.
Right.
Is that correct?
Well,
Anyway, because I can't remember how we wrote this.
if they're going to have, okay, the way that we wrote this out,
Yeah, this would be Gad, Simeon, and Reuben.
it would actually have gone Reuben, Simeon, and Gad if they were following the standard of the camp of Reuben on the south.
Okay, so Reuben's the first one mentioned?
Yeah.
No.
What's okay, the camp to the east is called the camp of Judah.
Right, this is the camp of Judah. Right, so that's Judah.
The camp to the south is the camp of Reuben.
Okay, and they mention the names, though, in which order? This order.
I'm understanding it was Reuben, Simeon, and Gad.
That when we wrote them down, though, we wrote them this way.
Right.
Why did we write them that way? Oh, because I wrote them this way.
You wrote them that way. I was
Okay.
giving them to you right to left as
Right. Well, it'd still be this way, 4, 5, 6, but this would be Reuben, Simeon, and Gad.
right.
There you go. Okay, and then after Gad would be the priests, so Moses' children, and then the Levites based upon the sons of Levi.
Well, I was looking at it. If we were basing this on columns, that wouldn't the camp of Judah in going first, wouldn't they be leading everybody else?
Yeah, so
And-
Judah's going first.
Okay. And then wouldn't the camp of Dan to the north and the camp of Reuben to the south have gone on the sides of the Levites and the priests, protecting the tabernacle.
Well, that's not what it says though in the Bible. It's going to say that they're going to go second.
That the priests are going second?
No, that these are going second, then
Okay.
the priests, then these go behind, and then these go behind.
Okay.
So the order in which they do this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? So these are your different groups.
Now, was there a standard for the priests?
I don't know. I didn't notice a standard for the priests. And it says that each tribe has their standard. Right?
It also shows in my diagram that east of the Levites, there's one tribe in each of the four corners.
Right. So, yeah,
so you
I
have
understand
Sons
that.
of Aaron in the first one, which is with the Judah. And then in the north, you have, so small here,
Yeah.
Methan. And in the south, you have K, Kafan, or whatever it is. And then in the west, you have the Gershonites or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, so you're going to see all these different ways in which people divide this, right? So if I go to I've got a bunch of diagrams here. So you'll see all these various ways in which people try to, oh, that's not what I want. You can't really see this. This is sort of how I had done it, though this one's showing the east down at the bottom. So you would see east, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, then Reuben, Simeon, Gad, Dan, Asher, Naphtali. And then the way that they laid this out is different because they put Benjamin here, Manasseh and Ephraim behind them. So they put them all out, that the ones mentioned first are all on the outside. But since this has to do with the way that they travel, Benjamin would have to be at the back. At least that's the way that I would take it. Another diagram here. This one here, I'll show you. Oops, that's not what I want. How's that open up like that? Link in new tab. No, it's not giving me a good, oh, I see, it's going to some website. Okay. Okay, this picture you can see here. I'm going to open this one in a new tab. Maybe that will, no. Is this it? Oh, this is the one I want. Still not going to look good. Let me see. Ah, there we go. So in this one, you can see they put, in the east, they have Judah in closest to the tabernacle, guarding the door, the east side, where I would have put Judah on the outside. And so in this one, they put those main standards, Ephraim, Dan, Judah, and Reuben, closest to the sanctuary of the 12 tribes. And this is sort of the way that I'd always pictured it. Of course, I pictured obviously that they would have these tribes off in the side, but I'm talking about this center, that you would have these tribes closest to the tabernacle and the other tribes off to the side, right? But in my understanding now that Judah is going to go first, this wouldn't make sense that Judah is here. Now, if you did have them off to the side, then you could have Judah go first and then the tribes come from the side. But then you would have to look at what happens on these sides. You wouldn't have the standard of Dan being in the middle with Asher and Naphtali on either side of them, or Gad in the middle with Simeon and Reuben. I mean, maybe you would. Maybe it doesn't matter which order those tribes go in. You understand what I'm saying? because I'm trying to think of this from a practical sense of when they start to move, when they're going to move the tabernacle and travel as a nation, they're doing so in an orderly fashion. And so in trying to decide how they're arranged, there's all these different choices, and I'm not sure necessarily which is the right one. But I've just tried to look at it from a practical sense. Yeah, so this one has the different standards. So if you look at some of these different options, you'll see lots of different ideas. This one, it must be a way to just open this up. People getting an idea, a better idea as we look at these things. So here's another option. So this is kind of fairly typical as well. You have the standards on the outside. You have Judah in the center and Zebulun and Issachar on either side. And here they have listed the different standards that they had based upon some of this is rabbinic tradition. A sword, the city gate is Simeon, Reuben's a man and water. The leader of a troop is Gad. A lot of this is based upon the blessings. Benjamin's a wolf, Asher a goblet or cup. Dan is a serpent, horse and rider. Naphtali a leaping hind or stag. So based upon their blessings, they have these different standards. But we can see from the symbols of Judah, Ephraim, Dan, and Reuben, these are the main standards: the lion, the ox, the man, and the eagle that are understood and that we see in the book of Ezekiel. Any further thoughts on this? So however it's laid out, it's laid out in a practical way for the tribes to move. And you're going to have these four standards, whether they're facing out, which I think they would. So I'm not sure if this is the best layout. This is probably the most common layout that I've seen. But again, some of them will put, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Reuben, Simeon, Gad, Ephraim, Manasseh, Benjamin, or actually they will, and they'll put Dan, Naphtali, Asher. So they put it in the order that it's described. And Dan is mentioned last, right? In the description of how they go around the tabernacle. Let me go there. Right, so when you're going to go through finally, let me see here. Is that the way that they were described, or were they? No, they weren't. So they didn't go clockwise. Gad. Okay, this is when they go out. Judah, south side of the camp. Okay, let's read this over again. So every man of the children of Israel shall pitch by his own standard with the ensign of their father's house, far off about the tabernacle of the congregation shall they pitch. And on the east side toward the rising of the sun shall they of the standard of the camp of Judah pitch throughout their armies and Nashon the son of Amminadab shall be the captain of the children of Judah, and his host, and those that were numbered of them were 314,600. And then it says, and those that pitch next are going to be Issachar and his host. So when it says next unto him, what does that imply?
Beside him.
Okay, it could be beside, but it could be second in order.
Yeah, second in order sounds better, because if I went out first and then Stephen went out next.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I've taken it, but I could be wrong, because, you know, this is just another language translated into English. So I'm just going to look at the Hebrew word next and see what that means. Okay, well, that's a pretty broad term. So it doesn't necessarily mean next in the way that the English word could mean next, because it means all kinds of things. So above, over, downward aspect. It could be after, against, among. So it can mean after. Beside, it can mean beside, and it can mean between. So it has a lot of different meanings that would mean quite a bit different things than how we understand the word next. And then it says the tribe of Zebulun, and here it doesn't say next. Right? So we don't have that word being used. And all that were numbered, it says here in verse 9, these shall first set forward. Right? So they're going to be the first ones that go forward, that start the journey. Right? And then it says on the south side shall be the standard of the camp of Reuben. So it's going to mention Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. And it says, and they shall set forth the second in rank. That's Numbers 2:16. And then it's going to have Manasseh mentioned next, Benjamin, and his host. And they shall go third in rank. Okay, so I was wrong. I was thinking they went last. And the standard of the camp of Dan shall be on the north side. And okay, let me go back here. So it's not doing this in the way that I would expect. So it's going to mention so when it deals with Dan, it doesn't say that they go last. So it just mentions the first, second, and third. So by implication, Dan would be last, correct?
Yeah, my translation it says hindmost.
Where's that? Oh, there they is. There it is, hindmost. I didn't see that. So Dan's tribe, Dan is going to be last. Okay, so what does it mean Dan is last? I should have noticed this. Because what is Dan? What is he? What was his blessing about?
His blessing was more almost as a curse, but he was also, by name, he was to be a judge.
Yeah, and he was going to be a backbiter,
Right,
who bites at the horse's heels or whatever, right?
right.
And of course he's at the back. He's at the hindmost, right? So he's the one who's actually most vulnerable to being attacked from behind. What I think is interesting anyway.
It would have been the tribe of Dan then that had to face Amalek when Amalek came to battle them.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. That Dan would be at the back. They were the ones, because this would describe. I mean, it's hard to say what they did at that time. But yeah, I mean, it's the same time basically, right? When so Dan was the one that was attacked from behind, right?
Well, this is well, it does say those who were feeble. So you have to then presume, was everybody that was feeble from Dan? You know,
Yeah,
could
it
it
would be
not
those feeble from Dan. I mean,
yeah, would it not be that there'd be feeble people from every tribe?
okay, but they're supposed to travel with their tribes when they're traveling.
So therefore, it would just be the feeble from Dan that were being killed by Amalek.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, if that's how they actually did travel at that time, in that situation, which I think they would, based upon this is describing how they normally traveled, and that's when they were normally traveling.
Well, when they came out of Egypt, they weren't really. This year's after.
Well, I know this is after, but we know that, yeah, which is true, right? So that's the question. We know that they went out harnessed, as it says in the King James, which means that they went organized as a military outfit, that they weren't just randomly, sort of traveling as a mob. They were actually organized when they left Egypt.
But they weren't organized according to
The tribes, you're saying?
this fashion. They weren't disorganized.
Yeah, so you could be right. You could be right that they wouldn't have had Dan at the back, because this is later. So it's hard to say, but I think you're probably right. But generally, if they're traveling, Dan would be the one that's the most vulnerable, being at the back. They were the ones who could be attacked from behind. So this is how they're going to travel when they're traveling for the 40 years. Okay. So I hope we have a much better picture in our mind by working through this. I know I do. I've still not decided on how they were laid out, but I would go for an adaptation of this. That is, I would put the tribe of Judah in the front, then Issachar, then Zebulun, and then I would put Reuben, Simeon, and Gad in this way, like they have it laid out here, so that Reuben could then go right behind Zebulun. And then we would know that the priests and the Levites would then leave, even though it doesn't mention that in that context of what we read, but they're going to be in the middle. Now, and we know that Ephraim's then going to be the third, so this group is going to be the third group. And then we know that this group would be the last. So, any thoughts on this? Okay, Tom, you got anything to say?
No, I'm just studying the layout here. I think the way we're talking, I think the common sense way that you're speaking, I think would move in that fashion.
Yeah. And we're gonna be looking at, once we start next week, we're gonna go through this in a bit more detail as we go through Ezekiel and then Revelation, and to see how things are laid out. But this lion, this man, this ox, and this eagle are the faces that are seen on the four living creatures. So just to sort of go ahead, and so when we get to Revelation chapter 4, we're going to have these four living creatures. The first beast, it says in verse 7, was like a lion, and the second beast a calf, and the third beast had the face of a man, and the fourth beast was like a flying eagle. Now, if you line these up with the tribes, which would be the first beast? Would be which tribe?
The lion.
So that would be Judah, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And the calf would be Ephraim. And the third beast would be Reuben's tribe. And the fourth would be Dan's tribe. So the only difference from the order in which they go out would be the two in the middle would be switched. So the eagle would be last. That would be the last standard going out. And the lion would be the first standard. But in this case, and I'm not saying that they put them in this order for some particular reason relating to the standards. But this is how he sees it. This is how John sees it in vision. So he sees these four living creatures, and each one has this different face. And so when we look at Ezekiel chapter 1, just to remind people about it, we had these living creatures, which were cherubim, and they're going to have, most people interpret this that each one has four faces. The face of a man, the face of a lion on the right side, and the face of an ox on the left side. And they also have a face of an eagle. And that's the way the King James translates it. But I pointed out when we went through this section, Ezekiel chapter 1, that it can be translated differently. Though it wouldn't be the typical way you would translate it. But it could be that each of these fours, it says in, where is it? In verse 6, and everyone had four faces and everyone had four wings. And just the translation into English there would sound like they got four faces, they all have four wings. But it could be that each four had faces and each of the four had wings, saying that all of them had faces, all of them had wings. And even when you read later, it can be translated in that way. But I'm not 100% certain that I'm right. If this is a vision that Ezekiel sees, that John sees in Revelation, it seems odd that these each would have four faces. But of course, we know this could be symbolic of something. And the differences in John chapter 4, with each one having its own face, would just have some symbolic meaning. But I still take the position, though tentatively, that each of these cherubim have a different face. They don't all have four faces. And so that's one of the things we look at when we look at the standards. Somebody had a comment?
Yeah, that makes sense when you see it with all the other bits that are lined up. You can come back to that and reevaluate that in that specific way, which would make more sense.
Yeah, the other interpretation that we have, and we're going to look at this again, because in tying up these loose ends with Ezekiel, we're going to go back to the zodiac idea. And in the zodiac, we can see that these represent the four main zodiac signs. The lion, of course, is Leo, and Taurus, the bull, is the ox. And Aquarius is the man. And then the eagle there is an eagle, but there's also the serpent, right? So that's really where we look at, is at the serpent one, because the eagle is a secondary application of the standard. But originally it's a serpent. And if you look at the serpent and the eagle in the zodiac, they're together. So, but this would be an understanding of the zodiac. And the zodiac is just the constellations through which is the ecliptic. That's where the sun and the moon and the planets pass through this band in the sky. So there's a lot more constellations where the sun and the moon and the planets don't pass through. So it's these constellations that they pass through. And these were a type of timepiece that was used by the ancients. And so we're arguing from Ezekiel that Ezekiel is relating to time based upon this first vision. This has to do with time prophecies. And that would explain why Ezekiel has all these dates and why he has these time prophecies. So we're going to come back to those things and look at them in a bit more detail again. So any final thoughts that we need to wrap up before we close this part dealing with the division of the camp?
I have more for early this next week.
Okay. Yeah, but this is very helpful. I think what we did today.
It's a good basis.
Yeah, it's helping us because we looked at these things before, but we didn't have enough information to know how to look at it. So I think we have a better idea how to look at these things as we review them. And so we have these symbols show up again and again in the Bible, especially a lion showing up, but also the symbol of an ox. Symbol of the eagle shows up, and the symbol of a man. And so people use these things also to represent the four gospels, though that's sort of more a tradition rather than something that's based on the Bible. But definitely all of these symbols are used throughout the scriptures to point to things. And so I would think that they're always going back to this primary reference, which is the tribes here, which is the sons of Jacob. Okay, so we'll leave it there for today, because anything else is going to take us time to look at. And I suggest people try to work these things out on their own. Now, I didn't even address the numbers, which I do want to spend some time with as well. So I think all these numbers are significant because we are going to look at numbers 3 again in context of these numbers, of what's this is talking about, because numbers 3 follows numbers 2. And that's going to be the next thing where they're going to divide up they're going to do this count of the Levites, of all the children of Levi, and compared to the firstborn of the children of Israel. We're going to look at those numbers again. Okay, so let's close in prayer. Okay, let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for your words of Scripture. We know that these things in the past are at times difficult for us to grasp. We weren't there. We have your words. We have the guidance of your Holy Spirit. And we just ask, Lord, that as we continue to study these things, that we can see them more clearly. Help us to do our individual study, to work through these things on our own, and to draw conclusions guided by your Spirit. Be with us throughout this day, and we thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.